This game was provided to Crits Happen by Dragon's Lair Comics and Fantasy. Check them out online at dlair.net for all your comic and gaming needs. Hi everyone, it's Tox from critshappen.com. Thanks for watching and welcome back. Today I've got a critical review of Euchronia from Iello Games. This is a 2 to 5 player game, plays in about 45 to 60 minutes, and they recommend it for ages 14 and up. Now before we jump into this, I need to make a statement. A lot of people have compared this game to another game called Glory to Rome. I don't own Glory to Rome, I've never played Glory to Rome. I've seen it online and I've watched it quite intensively doing some research for this review, but I just feel that since I don't own it and I've never physically played it, that no matter how much research I could do, it wouldn't be fair for me to compare it to that game. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to look at Euchronia as itself, show you a little bit about the gameplay, and then come back and give you my opinion on the components, on the gameplay, and on the experience. But what is Euchronia? Well, essentially it is a resource management game. You are the head of a noble house in the city of Euchronia, living in a universe where dinosaurs never died. So man and dinosaur has to work together to build this city to greatness. And your goal as the head of one of those noble houses is to use your resources and activities to your advantage to construct bigger and better buildings to achieve victory points through enriching the city. You achieve victory points by completing different constructions of buildings, and you're going to construct buildings by using cards that are resources and activities both from the deck and from an area called the Forum, which we'll explain during the gameplay. It's very different, it's very unique, but is it fun and is it something that we enjoy? Is it something you would enjoy? Why don't you come with us? This is a very interesting universe where dinosaur and man are working together to enrich the city of Euchronia. Grab your tools and grab your T-Rex and let's jump in to Euchronia. So looking at what you get with Euchronia, you get a stack of building cards, you get a stack of resource cards, you get 5 player boards that have different areas, we'll explain that in a second, and then you get Monopoly cards. We'll explain those in a second as well. But essentially there are 5 resource types inside of Euchronia. There's clay, which is yellow, there's wood, which is orange or brown, there is stone, which is gray or brown, depending on how you look at it. There is brick, which is red, and then there is marble, which is blue. In corresponding, there are the same types of colors for each of these buildings. So you'll see that there is clay for yellow, wood for orange, brown for stone, red for brick, and blue for marble. Each of the buildings has a number at the top, and that is both the amount of resources that you need to complete the building's construction and the victory points they will give you once you've completed them. To win, you have to get to a certain number of victory points, and that threshold is different by the amount of players that play in the game. But at its basic setup, a 2-player game requires you to get 20 victory points as an example. Now what you're going to do is each player, starting with the first player, is going to draw 6 cards from the resource stack. There's going to be 5 buildings laid out after they're all shuffled, and those will be for your choice during construction if you so choose to play that as a command. We'll explain that in a second. So what each player does is they first look at their hand of 6 cards, and they choose 1 card to discard to put into the Forum. And the Forum is sort of a common area for all players to utilize. So in this case, I would say, I have 2 explorations in hand. I'm going to go ahead and put that into the Forum. And then let's just say my opponent placed 1 in as well, and there's also an exploration there. This could be the same card discarded from each player. It could be multiple different cards from all the different players involved. The one really nice thing is because of the shifts inside of the Forum, and you'll see as we play a hand here, there's going to be a lot of changes that happen, whether it's a 2-player or a 5-player game, and you're going to have different strategies and different things develop over time. And basically what you do is you look at the cards in your hand and you make a choice to play one of these as an order. And you'll notice that there are symbols on each one of these and they do different things. So let's walk through each one and show you what they do. Let's start off with clay. This tells you when you place it as an order, you're going to take 1 card from the Forum and add it to your stock. The stock is the very bottom of your player board. There's 4 different sides to your player board. You have activities at the top, stock at the bottom, buildings under construction on the left, and buildings you've completed on the right. So what I could do is I could say, I'm going to play production on my domain, which is some of the terminology in the game. When I do that, I take one of the cards from the forum and I put it underneath my player board as stock or as resources. And I can only see the bottom third, but I know that I have 1 wood for my resources. Now my opponent would then play and he could choose one of his orders. And I'll just use the same cards in my hand as an example. Let's say he wanted to play exploration. He would put exploration down on his player board, and exploration allows you to take a card from your hand and put it into your stock. So he could take the draconians, which is brick, and put that into his stock, and he would have a brick. Now how does all this change the game? Well, the first thing you do is if you have a card on your domain at the beginning of your turn, you take it and you put it into the forum, and then you get to choose what you want to play from your hand. So each turn that you play something, whatever you play, the beginning of your next turn is going to go out into the forum. So using cards like the production could pull that card back into your player area as a stock and do different effects and different strategic choices throughout the game as these cards are going to change. Now in addition to playing a command order and just playing it as its own, you can play 2 of any type, and being like a wild card, choose any order to give. So I could play both of those and choose to play construction. Construction is how you're going to build buildings. Whether I were to play 2 of the same kind or I played the construction card as my order, it allows me to either start construction or transfer a resource from my stock to that construction. Now in order to play a construction card and start building a building that's in play, it's not as simple as play the construction card and choose any building. A card from the forum has to be sacrificed as the foundation for that card or for that building. So if I were to play construction and it says start a construction of a building, in this setup, the only 2 buildings I could choose are either the Predatorium or the Forge, because I could sacrifice the exploration as a foundation for the Predatorium, or I could sacrifice the production as a foundation for the Forge, because they match the same type. If there were other cards in play, like if I had a trade card in play here, I could sacrifice that from the forum to be able to play the Fountain as my construction. So what's in the forum, what you play on here to go into the forum on your next turn, makes a big difference as to which buildings you're going to be able to play. The interesting thing about that in the game is it lends itself to turn-on-turn strategy rather than a lot of big things happening on your one turn. So there is a lot of ebb and a lot of flow throughout the game. Now, in addition to just managing your resources and putting resources into your stock, once you have a building on your construction area, let's presume that I had this set up and we had another building come out here. Once I play construction, I can then take one of my resources from my stock and transfer it onto my building. Now in this case, I only take 1 resource of the type to complete it. So I would transfer it from my stock to the building, that would complete it. I would discard this card to a common discard pile, and I would move this over. And you'll see by the Predatorium, I would get 1 victory point, and it says ability limit +1. Or excuse me, activity limit +1. So what are activities? Well, it's a great point. When you start the game, you're allowed 2 activities +1 for every building you've completed. So in this case, I would normally be allowed to have 3 activities in play because I would have 2 naturally +1 for the building I finished. But this building gives me another, so I could have 4 activities. Activities are really nice. There's a term inside of the game called launching an activity. And what that means is if you launch an activity with the trade command, this tells you to take something from your stock and move it to your activities. Launching requires you to move down here to up here. Now, there's multiple different reasons you're going to want to do this. Having the most of any one type of activities in the game will give you a monopoly card for that type of activity and will give you a bonus. In this case, if we had the monopoly on the construction activities, we can transfer 1 construction card from the forum to our hand whenever a player completes a stone building. And in addition, as long as you have this monopoly for each construction activity you have is worth 1 victory point. So right now I would have 2 victory points, one for the building and one for my monopoly of construction. If I had a second construction activity, I would have 2 victory points from those, plus the one from the building. So having monopolies is a big part of the game. But in addition, it allows you to amplify the orders that you put on your domain. And there's different results depending on which order you're playing between exploration, construction, trade, draconians, and the different things that happen. It takes a little time, and there's really no nice way to say this. You can't pick up this game and immediately start playing. You're going to be referencing back to the rulebook. You're going to be trying to remember what each of the activity bonuses give you. But in a sense, for example, construction, if this were a construction order, I could complete that order twice. If I had a exploration activity up here and I played an exploration, I could complete that twice. The challenge comes in with different things, like for example with draconians. Naturally, draconians allows you to reveal a card, and all of your opponents must give you 1 copy of that card if they have it, and you can take one from the forum to your hand as well. If you have multiple activities for draconians, it doesn't allow you to just do it multiple times. It allows you to reveal multiple cards. So if anyone has any of those cards, they must give you 1. So it takes a little bit of terminology and a little bit of rules understanding to get into the game. But once you get into it, you start to see the synergies between when you want to have resources, when you want to have activities to gain monopolies, and the ability to boost your commands that you're going to play on your domain. And then what buildings are going to help you to manage those resources as well. Now, in addition, there's no draw phase. Instead of playing a command, you could choose to plot. And if you plot, you don't play any cards. You do have the option of copying another player's order. So when you play a card, it stays there automatically until the beginning of your next turn. But if I wanted to copy someone's card, I have to have a matching activity, and I can copy it once. And then in addition, when you plot, you get to draw up to 5 cards. If you already have 5 cards, you can draw 1 additional card. So there's going to be some key strategic moments where you need to know when to play cards and when to plot. There's a lot of different strategies inside of the game, which makes it very engaging. You can choose to go heavy resources. You can choose to go heavy monopoly and get points for your activities. You could choose to balance between your buildings and your activities, or you can go full on and just try and build a bunch of buildings. But having that diversity makes it a really good experience for the game. I know that's quite a lot. It's quite a bit to take in, but essentially the way the game works is you're going to use the common cards that are out inside of the forum. You're going to play cards to your domain to execute orders. You're going to put cards into your stock to build buildings. You're going to bring activities into play and launch them from your stock to be able to boost your abilities. And you're going to get buildings built to help you affect all of those different activities going on throughout the game, with the whole goal to begin to hit that threshold of having the most victory points and be declared the winner. But let's pull back and give you my final thoughts on what I think on the game. So that's Euchronia. Euchronia is a different game. If I look at it starting with the components, I get very disappointed. The components are really quite shoddy. The cards that they use for the building cards, while they're very slick and very good, like veneer, I guess, or sheen you would call it, they're squared edges and they're very, very flimsy. They're not a card type stock. They almost feel like just a thick paper type stock. And because of that, the corners can get bent really easily, and that's very disappointing. Iello really does a good job with some of their other games, I feel, and this one they kind of scrimped on that. The other thing that's a little odd and a little questioning are the use of the size of the resource cards. They're very small, and they fit inside of the normal kind of smaller Fantasy Flight sleeves, I guess you would say. But you're only using at any time 1/3 of the card. If it's on the bottom of your player mat or your domain, it's a resource, and you only see the bottom 1/3. If it's on the top, it's an activity, and you only see the top 1/3. So while I understand the point of trying to control the amount of space that's used on a board or on a table, these could have been full-size cards, and they could have still done exactly what they're supposed to do inside of the game, even given the size of the player board that you get. And that said, being that there's so many of these, when you sleeve them, it becomes an even higher stack, and they fall over really, really easily. And the card stock is about the same as the card stock that was used on the buildings. Because they're smaller, they're not quite as flimsy, and because they have round corners, they're a little bit more sturdy in that sense. So overall, from a component standpoint, it's a little odd. Now that said, the artwork is beautiful. It's very much like Seven Wonders. It's got that artistic watercolor kind of flair to it, and it comes through really, really well. They've done a very, very good job with that. The other thing from a component standpoint is the player board. This has pretty much all of the rules on it, which is really nice. The rule book itself is very, very short. It's only this folded piece of paper. It does have some examples in it, but one of the things that I found was lacking was just a glossary or something to explain the terminology that's used throughout the game. There's some confusing language that's used in the game, and it would just help if they would say something maybe as simple as launching an activity, for example, is one of the terminologies used. Launching an activity means you move it from being a resource up to being an activity. Doesn't mean like you're actually going to do anything, it just means that you move it from down here to up here. That would have been really nice to explain because it takes 2 or 3 games to get used to what that terminology means and how everything starts moving together. So component-wise, I feel like there were some things that could have been different, maybe made better choices and provided a little bit better of an experience dealing with the components themselves. Now let's look at the gameplay. The gameplay is really fun. It's a little hard at first, like I said, to understand the terminology, but once you understand the terminology, it works quite well. At its base, you're playing your resources into your resource area, you're putting them up to an activity when you want to amplify those type of resource or those type of commands to be able to do better with in the game, and you're doing that to get Monopoly so you can get more points as well. The only downside to the gameplay really comes in the buildings, and that kind of sounds weird because that may seem to most people to be the crux of the game, and it is. But the problem I have with the buildings is that they don't have any kind of rarity to the buildings. And what I mean by that is, yes, the lower end buildings cost less resources to build, and the higher end buildings cost higher resources to build. There's 2 of every building in this stack. So if somebody else gets the fountain, and I'm looking to get the fountain, I know there's another one in this stack. I've just got to find it and get to it. And in a multiplayer 4 or 5 player game, you're going to get to those cards as people keep acquiring new buildings to construct. So I felt that they could have made a little bit more of a rare system to this, where some things were just more impactful, and there were less of them in this deck, and other things were more standard, and they're more common, and there could have been more of them in the deck. I felt that was a big miss. I also felt that there was a great amount of synergy between the buildings, and this was the flip side of this. So while there's 2 of every building in there, the buildings work together with other specific buildings very, very well. It's not just a case of you're going to go out and get the highest point total building to be building. That's something that I did really like about the gameplay. I felt that there was a lot of strategic decisions about when I was going to construct, not just what I was going to be able to construct because of what was in the forum and available to use as a foundation for my building, but I felt that it was really important for me to know how my buildings work together to keep the engine flowing so that I could make better decisions later on in the game. It scales really well. It starts very basic. You start off with getting your resources out, you're playing cards and moving things around the forum, and then once you start building buildings, it starts rolling. But I've played games where all I did was focus on the highest point buildings, and I've played games where I focused on synergy between my buildings. And without a doubt, the synergy tends to give you a better experience, it tends to give you better advantages in the game, and it just provides for a better gameplay experience. And speaking about gameplay experience, this game has a lot going for it in terms of when it's not your turn. One of the things that many of you know from watching my videos that frustrates the death out of me is playing a turn, putting all my stuff down, and then having to wait for everyone else to be done to go. Because I don't like games where I'm not engaged, and I don't like it where it's just feeling like I'm playing a solitaire game, waiting for people to make all their decisions. This game has a lot of interaction between players. Between people playing Draconians and getting cards from your hand or from the forum, from people changing the cards that are in the forum, and it changes quite rapidly and quite drastically from turn to turn, And all of those things going on turn to turn impacts your ability to make decisions on your turn. So I have found, especially in 4 and 5 player games, that you're going to be sitting there watching other players go, dealing with the interactions amongst players, and developing your strategy as it goes from player to player. That made it a lot of fun and really caught my attention and kept me into the game, which was a great experience. Overall, this is a hit of a game. It's got enough going for it that it could be a crit, but I feel it misses out on several key areas. Not just from the component stock and how good the components are, but from that rarity system inside of the buildings, and more importantly, from the fact that the theme doesn't connect. The dinosaurs don't even exist in the game for all intents and purposes. There's no cards that give you advantage to having more dinosaurs than humans, or humans than dinosaurs. In fact, they're not even resources. Apart from being part of the artwork, and maybe 1 or 2 buildings that mention the dinosaurs in terms of predators and things like that, there's really not a connection between the theme and the gameplay itself. I really felt that you could strip off the entire theme and put on any other theme you wanted, and it would still work just as fine. That was a little bit of a disappointment. Let's face it, I'm a kid at heart. I'm a little boy, and I love dinosaurs. Roar! It's just fun. So when we sat down and played this, we really expected dinosaurs to be an important part of the game because it was part of the theme in a pretty unique universe. I mean, what would you imagine if you had dinosaurs and man living together? I would think that there'd be dinosaurs that you couldn't control, or other dinosaurs that were easier to control. And maybe you would have buildings that dinosaurs could just rampage on and go crazy and destroy your opponents. None of that stuff exists inside Euchronia, and that was a big disappointment for me. But the gameplay experience is a lot of fun. And apart from the theme or the lack of connectivity to the theme, being able to manage your hand, manage your resources in play, and manage the forum and the buildings as it fluctuates and changes turn to turn really makes for a fun experience. So overall, I give it a hit. You'll have a lot of fun. It will take a little bit of an investment to learn to understand the taxonomy and the ebb and flow of the game, but once you do, it's an enjoyable experience that you'll have a great time playing. Thanks so much for watching this critical review. We hope you've enjoyed it. We'd love to hear from you. Are you a Glory to Rome player who loves this game? Are you a player who hates this game? Are you someone who's never heard of either and this is a brand new experience for you? We love to hear from all of our fans from all around the world, so we really do appreciate you engaging. Feel free to leave your comments here on the YouTube channel. You can find us, of course, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Google Plus by searching Crits Happen, and of course at our homepage at critshappen.com. But until we see you next time, keep rolling those dice, and we hope they're all crits. Thank you again to Dragon's Lair for providing us a copy of this game to review for you. Check them out online at dlair.net for all your comic and gaming needs.